The first smile. Rafik had always preferred the window seat, not because of the scenery, but because it gave him a sense of motion, a feeling that life was moving forward even when his own days felt repetitive. Every morning, at 7:40, the train door slid open, letting in a quiet wave of commuters, each carrying their own stories, worries, and destinations. He sat, gazing out at the passing trees and rooftops. And then, one Tuesday in April, she sat in front of him. Aisha, a college student with soft eyes, a neatly wrapped dupatta, and books hugged tightly to her chest. She glanced at him only once, a brief moment, barely a second. But in that instant, something shifted, gentle, unspoken, but powerful. The next day, she sat there again. And the next. That was how it began, not with words, but with presence. Not with declarations, but with stolen glances. Not with touch, but with warmth carried through the air. The train became their world. Aisha always opened her notebook and wrote lines of poetry. Rafik always pretended to read the newspaper, but kept catching her reflection in the glass. One day, she looked up at him. He looked up at the same moment. Their eyes locked, awkwardly, shyly, beautifully. A small smile appeared on her lips. He smiled back, unable to stop himself. That was the beginning. If you want, I can expand part 1 to 3,000 words. The rainy morning. The monsoon came early that year. Gray clouds hung low, brushing the tops of buildings, and fat raindrops hammered the metal roof of the train station. Rafik arrived soaked, hair dripping, shirt clinging to him. He rubbed his hands together, trying to warm them. The train screeched in. He stepped in, heart suddenly racing. Would she be there today? The doors hissed open. People rushed in. And then, there she was. Her dupatta slightly wet, raindrops glittering on her eyelashes. She shook water off her books and sat in her usual seat. When she looked up and saw him, she smiled wider than ever before. Something changed that day. The weather softened the walls between them. Aisha took out her notebook. Her hand shook slightly as she wrote. Rafik watched the rain streak down the windows. He wanted to speak, to say anything, but words felt too heavy. Then the train jerked violently. Passengers stumbled. Books flew. The metal screeched as brakes slammed. Aisha slipped, her balance lost. Before he could think, Rafik reached out. His hand wrapped around hers. Time froze. Her fingers trembled. His heart pounded. Their eyes locked, not in fear, but in something deeper. Are you okay? He whispered. She nodded, still holding his hand. That moment rewrote both their lives. The beginning of unspoken love. After the slip, something changed. Not visibly, not dramatically, but quietly, like dawn touching the edges of night. Aisha now looked for him the moment she entered the train. Her smile appeared before she even sat. Rafik found himself waking earlier, dressing better, checking his reflection multiple times. Just in case, she looked at him longer than usual. Their eyes met more often now, not accidentally, but intentionally. The train became a silent love letter. Rafik noticed everything. How she brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear, how she hummed softly while writing, how she tapped her foot to rhythms only she heard. Aisha noticed him too, how he pretended to read but never turned the page, how he straightened his back when she entered, how he looked away the moment she caught him staring. Words had not been exchanged since the slip, yet thousands of thoughts passed between them every day. Love doesn't always start loudly. Sometimes it begins in quiet spaces, in glances, in shy smiles, in shared timings, when distance begins to feel painful. The train was unusually crowded the next week. Aisha couldn't reach her usual seat. She stood far away, holding a metal pole, her eyes searching. Rafik felt his chest tighten. They were only 10 feet apart, yet it felt like continents. She kept looking at him. He kept pretending not to notice. But their hearts noticed everything. When she finally reached her stop, she turned and gave him a small, sad smile. That tiny smile hurt more than it should. Love sometimes arrives before we understand it. The first conversation. It happened on a Thursday. Aisha stepped onto the train, and her scarf snagged on the door. Rafiq rushed forward, freeing it gently. "Thank you," she said, breathless. He nodded. "Anytime." Silence. A nervous silence. She stood there, clutching her books. He stood there, not knowing what to do. Then she said softly, "I see you every day." He smiled. "I know." A blush rose on her cheeks. "What do you read?" she asked. "Oh, I pretend to read the newspaper." She laughed, the most beautiful sound he'd heard in years. That was their first real conversation. But it felt like the continuation of something ancient, the day he walked her home. Aisha fell ill one morning, her steps unsteady, face pale. Rafiq noticed instantly. When they reached her station, she swayed slightly. Without thinking, he said, "Let me walk you home." She didn't argue. The rain had turned the streets muddy. Rafiq held his umbrella above both their heads, though half his shoulder got soaked. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. When he dropped her at her gate, she whispered, "You feel like safety." He didn't sleep that night, the moment they realized. Weeks passed. Smiles grew warmer. Silences grew deeper. Their hearts grew closer. One morning, Aisha handed him a folded piece of paper. "For you," she said shyly. Inside it was a poem she wrote. "Some strangers arrive like seasons, quietly, but they change everything." He read it 3 times, then looked at her, and she knew he knew. They loved each other. When love starts to speak without fear. They began sitting together, sharing headphones, sharing small stories, sharing the mornings. Aisha told him about her dreams, her fears, her childhood, her ambitions. Rafiq told her about his long work hours, his lonely evenings, his silent apartment. Their worlds blended like colors in rainwater. People around them started noticing, but they didn't care. Love had found its rhythm. The hard day. One morning Aisha didn't come. Rafiq waited, and waited, and waited. His chest tightened with every passing station. Was she sick? Did something happen? Had he done something wrong? He felt the emptiness of the seat like a wound. Love becomes real the moment absence hurts. The confession. The next day, she came running, breathless. "I'm so sorry, exams." He exhaled, relief flooding him. She sat beside him, heart pounding. Then she took his hand, boldly, softly, intentionally. "Rafiq," she whispered, "I think I." He squeezed her hand. "I know." Her eyes filled with tears. Happy tears. That day, under the soft hum of the train, they confessed without needing many words. Their love story began at a window, and it promised to last far beyond the journey. The first smile. The morning train always sounded the same, its metal wheels grinding softly against the tracks, the faint whistle carried by the cool air, the rhythmic clatter echoing across the still waking city. For most passengers, this sound was background noise. For Rafiq, it was the beginning of another predictable day. He stepped onto the platform at 7:35, just like he did every morning. His routine was almost painfully ordinary. Same breakfast, same shoes, same newspaper folded under his arm. He preferred life this way. Simple, steady, and uninterrupted. But life, as he would soon learn, rarely asks permission before changing. The doors of the train slid open with a hiss. Passengers pushed in gently, half awake, half drowned in their own thoughts. Rafiq slipped into the second coach and moved directly to his favorite spot, the window seat. It wasn't because he enjoyed the scenery. He just liked the feeling of movement, the sense that even if nothing changed in his life, at least the world outside was changing. But that day, April's breeze carried something different. He felt it before he saw it. A soft footstep, a faint rustling of pages, the gentle scent of jasmine shampoo. He glanced up casually, and there she was. A girl, not more than 20, stood near the seat opposite him, holding a notebook tight against her chest. Her dupatta was neatly draped, her hair tied into a loose ponytail, and tiny raindrops clung to the edge of her eyelashes like silver dust. She looked unsure, scanning the empty seats as if she didn't quite belong in the busy morning rush. She chose the seat right in front of him. Rafik's heart reacted before his mind could catch up. A soft, unexpected warmth spread through him. She opened her notebook, the corner of her mouth lifting slightly as she read something inside. She didn't look at him, not yet. But the small, peaceful curve of her lips made the train feel less like a metal box and more like a living, breathing place. For a few minutes, they traveled like strangers, completely silent, wrapped in separate worlds. He tried reading his newspaper but quickly realized he hadn't turned a single page. Then it happened. She lifted her eyes. He lifted his. Their eyes met, just for a heartbeat. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't intense. It wasn't some lightning strike moment. It was simple, soft, human. She blinked once, surprised. He looked away quickly, pretending to be deeply interested in a blank corner of the newspaper. But she smiled. He didn't see it directly. He saw it in the reflection of the train window, the slightest curve of her lips, shy and warm and almost secret. His breath caught for a second. Someone had smiled at him. Not politely, not accidentally, but sincerely. The next day, she sat there again and smiled again. That's how their story began, not with words, not with bold actions, not with grand gestures. Just a smile, a small one, soft enough to ignore, but strong enough to change a life. Rafik didn't know her name. He didn't know her age, her college, her dreams, her world. But he knew this. He wanted to see her smile again. So he sat by the window the next day, and the next, and the next. And every time she entered the coach, she looked for him first, just for a second, and her smile bloomed, gentle and glowing. Something beautiful was beginning. Quiet, unspoken, but undeniable. The train rattled onward, weaving past sleepy neighborhoods and fields washed in the pale golden glow of morning. Rafik sat unusually still. He usually tapped his fingers on his knee or adjusted his watch, anything to kill time. But today he was afraid to move, afraid he might break the fragile magic that had settled between them. He tried to read the newspaper again, failed again. His eyes drifted back toward her, not directly, but through the reflection in the window. Reflections made cowardice feel less embarrassing. She was writing now. Her handwriting was small, rounded, and unbelievably neat. Her pen moved in slow, thoughtful motions, like she was painting each word with intention. What was she writing? A diary entry? A poem? Lecture notes? He wondered, but he didn't dare ask. Instead, he watched in secret admiration as a faint frown appeared on her forehead whenever she paused to think. The kind of frown someone makes when choosing the perfect word. She looked peaceful. He couldn't remember the last time he felt that way. The train slowed as it approached the next station. Passengers shifted, rearranged, muttered, prepared to leave. He glanced at her again, this time without using the window's reflection. She caught him. Their eyes held. Longer than yesterday, longer than the first time. Not a second, 2 seconds, maybe 3, just long enough for something quiet and warm to pass between them. She lowered her gaze first, but not quickly, not abruptly. Slowly, gently, like she was savoring the softness of that moment. Rafik didn't smile at first. He was too stunned. But when she looked down, a smile shaped itself on his face without asking permission. At the next stop, she adjusted her dupatta, tucked her notebook under her arm, and stood up. As she moved past him, she hesitated, just for a heartbeat. Her steps slowed. Her eyes flicked toward him. She almost spoke, almost. And then she continued out of the train. Rafik stayed frozen. Did she want to say something? Was she waiting for him to say something? His chest tightened with regret. When the train started moving again, he let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. That night he thought of her more than he should have. Her quiet smile. Her soft gaze. The way her fingers held the pen as if she were writing secrets into that blue notebook. He wondered what her voice sounded like. Would it be gentle? Would it be bright? Would it be shy like her smile? He imagined her saying, "Good morning. Is this seat taken? Do you take this train every day?" Simple things. Plain words. Yet they made his heart beat faster in his chest. He hadn't felt this way in years. Not since before life became predictable. Not since before responsibilities stacked themselves on top of him like heavy books. She was like a breeze through a dusty room. Unexpected. Soft. Awakening. The next day, he arrived earlier than usual. He told himself it wasn't because of her. But even he didn't believe that. Every sound made him turn toward the platform entrance. Every rustle of fabric made his heartbeat spike. And then he saw her. Her steps were light, almost hurried. A strand of hair escaped her ponytail, brushing her cheek. She tucked it behind her ear in a motion so natural, it made his breath catch. This time, when she entered the coach, she didn't scan the seats. She looked directly at him first, and smiled. Not the shy, uncertain smile from yesterday. A full, warm, heart-softening smile that reached her eyes. She sat in the same seat as before. And for the first time, Rafik felt the train move in his chest too. Quiet, rhythmic, unstoppable. Something had started. Tiny, gentle, fragile, but real. Rafik pretended to read his newspaper again. This time, he forgot the newspaper was upside down. She noticed. A small laugh escaped her. He heard it. He felt it. It made the whole coach feel brighter. He fixed the paper quickly, flustered, cheeks warming. She looked down, hiding her smile behind her notebook. But she wasn't hiding well. Her eyes kept lifting, glancing up, meeting his for a second, then looking away quickly, as if she couldn't control the pull either. The train slowed near a crossing, and sunlight filtered through the window, landing directly on her. It illuminated her hair, her cheek, the little curve of her smile. She looked unreal in that moment, like a portrait painted by morning light. Rafik felt a strange ache in his chest. A sweet ache. An ache he didn't know he missed. He whispered inside his heart, "I hope she sits here again tomorrow. And the day after tomorrow. And every morning after that." He didn't know her name. But her presence already felt like a chapter of his life. A chapter that was just beginning. The rainy morning. Rain had a way of slowing the world down, softening edges, blurring boundaries, and revealing emotions that sunlight often hid. That morning, the sky opened before dawn. Heavy clouds hanging low like tired guardians of the city. By the time Rafik stepped out of his apartment, the rain was coming down in fine silver threads, soaking the streets, the trees, and eventually him. He should have taken an umbrella. He knew it. But he left in a hurry, afraid, though he'd never admit it, that he might miss her. His shirt clung to his shoulders, drops slid from his hair to his forehead, and each step splashed lightly. But none of it mattered. Not today. Because today, for the first time, he felt excited to board the train. The station buzzed with the strange brightness that only rain brings. Commuters shaking off umbrellas, vendors covering their stalls with plastic sheets, puddles forming everywhere. The metallic roof echoed with the steady tapping of raindrops. He wiped his glasses. He checked his watch. He scanned the entrance. Where was she? The train screeched into the station, and people hurried in. Rafik stepped inside and rushed to the window seat, heart beating like the rain on metal. He didn't care about getting wet anymore. He cared about one question. Would she come today? The doors remained open for a few seconds longer than usual, rain drifting in like a cool whisper. Then she appeared. Aisha stepped inside the coach, clutching her books to her chest. Her dupatta was wet at the edges, rainwater dripping from it like tiny stars. Her hair was darker from the moisture, the ends sticking to her cheeks. An umbrella in her hand dripped steadily onto the floor. She looked radiant. Not the kind of radiant that comes with perfect makeup or perfect clothes, but the kind of radiant that only realness creates. the glow of someone caught in a moment of life. Rafiq's breath hitched. Aisha's eyes swept the coach quickly. They found him immediately. Her smile appeared, softer than the rain, warmer than the morning. She wasn't just smiling. She was relieved, as if she had been searching for him too. She walked toward her usual seat. As she sat down, their eyes met again, longer this time, holding something neither of them dared to name yet. The train started moving with a jolt. Aisha opened her notebook, but her fingers trembled slightly. Not from cold. Rain hadn't chilled her. From something else. Something new. Something that had begun only yesterday. Something that both frightened and thrilled her. She wrote a few words, then stopped. She stole a glance at him. He was staring out the window, pretending to be lost in thought. But she saw the tiny smile forming on his face. The rain drummed on the roof. The coach swayed. The lights flickered slightly. Everything felt wrapped in a quiet, intimate glow. Halfway through the journey, the train suddenly slowed down more than usual. The tracks were slippery. Water had collected near the crossing. The brakes screeched, vibrating through the metal walls. People stumbled. Aisha wasn't holding anything for support. Her foot slipped. Her body tilted. Before she realized, she fell forward, and a hand caught hers. Rafiq's hand. Warm, firm, steady. Time didn't just slow, it stopped. Her eyes widened as she looked into his. Rainwater on her eyelashes sparkled like tiny diamonds. Her breath trembled. He didn't let go. Are you okay?" he asked softly. The question was simple, but something inside her felt undone. Something inside him awakened. She nodded slowly, still holding his hand. Passengers around them murmured, rearranged themselves, muttered about the rain and the delay. But inside the small bubble between their hands, nothing existed except the warmth of touch. When she finally pulled her hand back, it wasn't abrupt. It was gentle, hesitant, reluctant, as if her heart didn't agree with her fingers. For the rest of the journey, neither of them spoke. But the silence wasn't empty. It was full, overflowing with a new awareness, a new electricity. Every drop of rain seemed to echo a promise. Every sway of the train felt like a heartbeat. Rafiq kept glancing at his hand, the one that had held hers. It still tingled faintly. It felt alive. Aisha closed her notebook. She stared out of her window, but saw nothing outside. Only replayed the moment again and again. Her slip, his hand, his voice, their eyes. She pressed her palm to her chest, trying to calm the flutter inside. She had never felt this before. Not this softly, not this unexpectedly. The train was just a routine, a part of life. But today, it felt like the beginning of a story, a real one. When her stop arrived, she stood slowly, as if reluctant to step away from everything that had happened. She looked at him once more. A shy smile, a grateful nod, a silent thank you. She stepped off into the rain. Rafiq watched her from the window, unable to look away. The raindrops traced tiny rivers down the glass, distorting her shape, but not the feeling she left behind. Today, the rain had changed something. Quietly, softly, powerfully. A touch had been shared. A connection had formed. A love story had opened its first page. The train pulled away, but Rafiq stayed still, his eyes on the fading silhouette of the girl who had slipped into his life like a raindrop falling into still water. The rain outside thickened, turning the morning light soft and silver. Inside the train, everything felt strangely quiet after that small accident, almost as if the world itself had paused for them. Some passengers glanced over, mildly curious, but most returned to their newspapers and earphones. Only Rafiq and Aisha remained caught in the moment. Aisha gently pulled her hand back, though not too quickly. "Thank you," she whispered, brushing her damp hair behind her ear. Her voice was soft, nervous, but warm. Rafiq smiled back, trying to look calm even though his heart was pounding hard. "It's okay," he replied. "The floor gets slippery when the train stops like that." She nodded, still embarrassed, still blushing. For a moment, neither of them knew what to say. They had exchanged smiles for months, but this was the first time they had ever spoken. Words suddenly felt heavier, more serious. Aisha looked down at her notebook, pretending to read something, but she kept glancing up at Rafik. Rafik looked out the window, pretending to observe the passing trees, but he kept seeing her reflection in the glass. The rain slowed. The train began to move again. But something inside both of them had changed, something subtle but strong, like the opening of a window that had been closed for too long. For the rest of the journey, they didn't talk. They didn't need to. Their silence was comfortable, filled with new possibilities, new curiosity, and a quiet excitement they both tried to hide. As the train approached Aisha's station, she stood, adjusting her bag. Before stepping off, she turned back and gave Rafik a small smile. It was different this time, more open, more meaningful. Rafik smiled back, the kind of smile that stays even after a person leaves. Aisha stepped onto the platform, looked over her shoulder once more, and then disappeared into the crowd. But that day, as Rafik continued toward his stop, he realized something. He no longer looked forward to the train ride because of the scenery outside the window. He looked forward to the girl who smiled at him from the seat beside it. The next morning, Rafik woke earlier than usual. Not because he had extra work, not because he needed anything urgent, but because he wanted to get on the train a little sooner, just to see if Aisha would be there again. He boarded the same compartment, the same row, the same window seat, almost afraid someone else would sit in her place. The train was quieter than usual. A few students were half asleep, an old man read the newspaper, and the rhythmic sound of rain from last night still lingered in the air. Rafik sat, pretending to scroll through his phone, but his eyes kept drifting toward the seat across from him. Empty. For a moment, disappointment sank into his chest. Maybe she took another train? Maybe she changed her schedule? Maybe she didn't want to sit near him after yesterday? But just as doubt settled in, the door slid open. Aisha stepped in. Her scarf was slightly damp at the edges, and her hair held tiny droplets of dew. She scanned the compartment quickly, almost anxiously. When her eyes met Rafik's, her expression softened instantly. She walked toward him with the smallest, shyest smile. "Good morning," she said gently. Her voice was brighter today, more confident. Rafik straightened. "Good morning." She sat in the same seat as always, the one she'd occupied for months, and for the first time, the silence between them felt unnatural. Yesterday had broken the invisible wall. Now words wanted to replace smiles. Aisha opened her notebook, but instead of studying, she doodled absent-mindedly. Rafik glanced at her until she caught him. She laughed softly. "Do you always take this train?" she asked. "Yes," he replied. "Every morning." "You?" "Same," Aisha said. "I've seen you before." Her cheeks turned a little pink. I think we both noticed each other." Rafik chuckled. "I think so too." A moment passed. The train rattled along the tracks. Morning sunlight slid through the windows, lighting her face in soft gold. "You're in college?" Rafik asked. Aisha nodded. "First year. Business studies." Her fingers played with the corner of her notebook. "And you?" "Work." "Yes," Rafik said. "Office job. Not very exciting." "Better than exams," she joked. They both laughed. Somehow, everything felt easy now, comfortable, natural. Their conversation drifted effortlessly. Small things, random things, daily routine, morning rush, how the chai at the platform stall tasted terrible but smelled amazing. With each sentence, their voices grew warmer. With each glance, something gentle formed between them. As the train approached Aisha's stop, she stood up slowly, almost reluctantly. "I'll see you tomorrow," she said, looking directly at him. Rafik felt that sentence settle warmly inside him. Yes, tomorrow. Aisha stepped off. She didn't look back this time, but not because she didn't want to. She didn't need to. Their story had already begun. The next few days unfolded like quiet chapters in a story neither of them expected to start. Every morning, the train door opened, and Aisha appeared with that soft smile that now felt like the best part of Rafiq's day. They didn't sit far anymore. They sat right beside each other. The seat by the window belonged to Aisha. She loved watching the passing fields. The seat beside her belonged to Rafiq, though neither of them ever said it out loud. Each morning, their conversations grew longer, deeper, warmer. One morning, tea and laughter. Aisha held a small paper cup. "Try this tea," she said, offering it with a grin. "It's from the same awful stall you complained about." Rafiq pretended to hesitate. "I'm risking my life for this." Aisha laughed, nudging him lightly. "Just drink it." He took a sip. His face contorted dramatically. Aisha burst into laughter so loudly that even the old man reading the newspaper smiled. "But you still drink it every day?" Rafiq asked, raising an eyebrow. Aisha nodded proudly. "It tastes bad, but it wakes me up. Just like your morning jokes," he teased. She rolled her eyes, but her smile only widened. Another morning, a small secret. As the train sped through the countryside, Aisha rested her notebook on her lap, flipping through pages. One sheet slipped and fell at Rafiq's feet. When he picked it up, he froze. It wasn't notes. It was a sketch of the train window, the same window she sat by every day. Aisha quickly grabbed it, embarrassed. "It's nothing. I just draw for fun." "It's beautiful," Rafiq said honestly. "You're really talented." Her eyes softened. "I don't show my drawings to anyone." "You showed this one," he said gently. She looked down, her voice quiet. "Maybe because you don't feel strange to talk to." Rafiq felt a warmth he couldn't explain. Another morning, a missed station. Their conversation was so absorbing that Rafiq didn't notice the signs flashing past. Suddenly, Aisha gasped. "Your station, didn't it already pass?" Rafiq blinked. "Yes." "Oh no." They burst into laughter as the train rushed forward. "You really forgot because of talking to me?" she teased. "I didn't mind," he replied. Aisha looked at him, really looked, and realized something. Talking to Rafiq didn't feel like talking to a stranger. It felt like talking to someone her heart already trusted. A quiet morning, something changes. One morning, Aisha seemed quieter. Her hands trembled slightly as she held her notebook. Rafiq noticed immediately. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Just tired." But her eyes told a different story. "Something happened?" he pressed gently. She hesitated. "My exam results are coming today. I'm scared." Rafiq gave a small smile. "You'll do great." "You don't know that." "I know you," he said softly. Aisha's lips parted slightly in surprise. Before she could reply, the train slowed near her station. She stood slowly, then turned back to him. "Thank you," she whispered, "for being here." And for the first time, Rafiq wished the train would never reach her stop. As Aisha disappeared into the morning crowd, Rafiq stared at the empty seat beside him. He realized something quietly, deeply. She wasn't just a part of his mornings anymore. She was becoming a part of his life. The next morning felt heavier than usual. The train platform was crowded, yet strangely quiet. Rafiq stood near the door, checking every face that passed through, waiting for one face in particular. The train whistle blew, steam rose, people hurried. But Aisha didn't appear. Rafiq's heart sank a little. Maybe she overslept? Maybe she took another train? Or maybe the exam results? He sat in their usual seats, hers by the window, his beside it, and kept glancing toward the door until the train started moving. Just when he was sure she wouldn't come, the door slid open. Aisha ran in, breathless, hair slightly messy, cheeks flushed. She rushed to the seat beside him as if it had always belonged to her. "You're late today," Rafiq said, relieved. "I almost missed it," she laughed softly. Then her smile faded. The results came. Rafiq's expression sharpened. And Aisha hesitated. She bit her lip. Her fingers curled tightly around her bag strap. I didn't do as well as I hoped, she whispered. Rafiq's heart tightened. Aisha, I'm sorry. It's not terrible, she said quickly. I passed, but not as high as I wanted. Her voice trembled. I studied so much. I thought I'd make my parents proud. Rafiq turned toward her. Hey, he said gently. Everyone has days like this. One exam doesn't define you. She nodded, but tears shimmered in her eyes. Tears she didn't want anyone to see. When the train jerked slightly, Aisha instinctively leaned closer. A small tear escaped. Without thinking, Rafiq reached out and handed her a tissue. Thank you, she whispered, wiping quickly. I'm usually stronger than this. You don't have to be strong all the time, he said softly. Not in front of me. Aisha looked at him, startled by the warmth in his voice. Their eyes locked, really locked, for the first time. No shy glances, no accidental looks. Just a long, quiet connection. Aisha spoke first, her voice barely above a breath. You always make things feel lighter. And you make my mornings brighter, Rafiq replied without hesitation. Aisha blinked. Her cheeks flushed slowly, beautifully. The train sped forward, but inside their small corner, the world softened into something warm and fragile. The moment that changed everything. As they neared Aisha's station, she didn't stand immediately. She lingered. The doors opened. She rose halfway, then stopped and turned toward him again. Rafiq, she said softly. Yes. She hesitated, just for a heartbeat, before saying, Can we talk after your work? Maybe meet somewhere? Only if you want to. Rafiq's breath caught. Yes, he said instantly. I'd like that. Aisha smiled. One of those quiet, genuine smiles that stayed long after a person left. I'll text you, she said, then paused. Oh, I don't have your number. Rafiq laughed nervously and handed her his phone. She quickly typed hers in and passed it back, fingers brushing his lightly. After work, she repeated. And with that, she stepped onto the platform. This time, she did look back. And Rafiq knew. Their story had just crossed from morning train rides into something deeper, something real. That evening, Rafiq found himself leaving work earlier than usual. Not because he had urgent matters, not because his boss asked him to, but because he couldn't wait to meet her. The small cafe they had agreed on smelled faintly of coffee and rain-soaked streets. Aisha was already there, sitting at a corner table, her bag resting against her chair, her hair slightly damp from the evening drizzle. She looked up as he entered and gave him a tentative smile, nervous, yet warm. Hi, she said softly, her voice carrying the faint lilt of morning excitement still lingering in her tone. Hi, Rafiq replied, returning her smile with the kind of ease that surprised even him. They ordered tea and sandwiches, but the food went mostly untouched. Words flowed instead, first carefully, then more freely. They shared small stories. How she had struggled to wake up that morning after the exam results. How he had spent half the day replaying the moment she slipped on the train in his mind. How the rain had seemed more beautiful after that moment, somehow infused with the memory of their hands touching. They laughed together, sometimes softly, sometimes openly, and for the first time, neither of them felt the need to check their watches or hurry. The walk home. When it was time to leave, the rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle. Rafiq offered his umbrella. Aisha hesitated, then accepted it. The streets were quiet, the usual bustle softened by the fading rain. They walked side by side, close enough for their shoulders to brush, but neither spoke at first. Then, without any conscious decision, Rafiq reached for her hand. It wasn't a bold gesture. It wasn't dramatic. It was natural, necessary, like their bodies had remembered something their minds hadn't. Aisha's fingers curled around his. She didn't pull away. She didn't look up. She just let herself feel the warmth, the steady pulse of his hand against hers. The streetlights cast long shadows on the wet pavement, reflecting the quiet rhythm of their steps. They didn't need words. Every glance, every breath, every gentle squeeze said what their lips could not. Finally, as they reached her gate, she turned to him, eyes glistening from the rain, or perhaps from the emotions of the evening. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" he asked, though he already knew. "For being here. For everything today," she said, a small smile forming on her lips. Rafik's heart swelled. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "I wanted to be." For a long moment, they stood there, close yet apart, suspended in the quiet intimacy of the evening. Then Aisha stepped inside her gate, and he watched her go, feeling an unfamiliar ache of longing in his chest. That night, Rafik couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the walk, the rain, the umbrella, the brush of her fingers against his. And in the stillness, he realized something unmistakable. He didn't just like her smile anymore. He didn't just look forward to mornings with her. He had begun to care deeply. The next morning, Rafik arrived at the train station earlier than usual. He could hardly sit still on the platform bench, his mind replaying the previous evening's walk. Her fingers intertwined with his, the quiet conversation, the warmth she left lingering like sunlight on his chest. When the train pulled in, he scanned the coach immediately. And there she was, Aisha, sitting in her usual window seat, hair slightly damp from the drizzle outside, eyes scanning the passing scenery. Today felt different. He could sense it in the way she held herself, the subtle way she smiled before even glancing at him. He moved toward his seat beside her, heart beating faster than the rhythmic clatter of the train on the tracks. "Good morning," he said softly, almost unable to meet her eyes. "Good morning," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. For the first few minutes, they didn't speak. They simply settled into the comfort of each other's presence, the world around them fading into the background. Their hands, almost by habit, brushed against each other on the seat between them. Neither pulled away. Neither spoke. Finally, she opened her notebook, but this time, not to write notes. She turned it toward him and showed him a single page. It was a short poem, written in neat, careful handwriting. Some strangers arrive like seasons, quietly, but they change everything. Rafik read it, his chest tightening. He looked up, and their eyes met, really met. No shy glances, no avoidance. Only honesty, raw and undeniable. "You wrote this for me?" he asked, voice trembling slightly. Aisha nodded, cheeks flushing, eyes fixed on the page. "Maybe," she said softly. "I think maybe it's for both of us." Rafik's breath caught. For months, they had shared glances, smiles, small conversations, and fleeting touches. But today, in this quiet morning, something shifted. The realization settled gently but firmly in both their hearts. This was love, not the fleeting crush of a passing glance, not the curious interest of routine encounters. This was something deeper, something patient, something that had been growing quietly, unnoticed, until it finally declared itself. He reached for her hand, not forcefully, not dramatically, just naturally, and she didn't pull away. The warmth of their palms pressed together became a silent promise, a shared understanding that words were no longer necessary. For the rest of the journey, they sat like that, hands intertwined, glances exchanged, hearts speaking in a language only they could understand. The train rattled onward, but neither noticed the stops or the passing scenery. When Aisha's station arrived, she reluctantly withdrew her hand. But the look she gave him as she stood, soft, knowing, full of anticipation, was enough to tell Rafik everything he needed to know. As she stepped onto the platform, he whispered softly, "See you tomorrow." She smiled, a gentle curve of lips and warmth in her eyes, and replied, "Tomorrow." The doors closed. The train moved forward. And yet, for both of them, it felt as if the world had stopped. Their love had been acknowledged, and nothing would ever be the same again. The days that followed felt different, more alive, more delicate, more meaningful. Rafik and Aisha no longer needed long conversations to feel connected. Their eyes, their smiles, even the subtle brush of fingers across a notebook spoke volumes. Every morning, the train became their private world. The rhythmic clatter of wheels against the tracks seemed to match the rhythm of their hearts. They exchanged small jokes, shared stories of their day ahead, or simply sat in comfortable silence, each glance carrying a universe of unspoken words. Shared headphones. One morning, Aisha brought a small pair of earphones and handed one to Rafik. "I found this song yesterday. I thought, maybe you'd like it," she said softly. He took it, smiling. "I'm listening." As the soft melody filled their shared space, they both looked out the window, shoulders lightly brushing. The song wasn't important. The moment was, and neither of them wanted to speak, because speaking might break the delicate rhythm they were sharing. Sometimes, love doesn't need words. Sometimes, it is felt in silence, in proximity, in shared breaths. Little confessions. One rainy morning, as the train swayed gently, Aisha leaned toward Rafik. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I like mornings now," she admitted, looking out the window. Rafik turned to her. "Because of the train?" She shook her head. "Because of you." He swallowed, his throat tight. He had been feeling the same way, but hearing her voice say it aloud made his heart race. "I like mornings too," he said softly. "Because of you." For a brief moment, the world outside, the rain, the tracks, the other passengers, faded completely. It was just them, the rainy day that changed everything. A week later, the monsoon arrived in full force. The train slowed as the tracks were slick with rain. Water streamed down the windows, blurring the world outside. Rafik and Aisha sat closer than usual, shoulders touching, eyes occasionally meeting over the reflection of the passing droplets. "You know," Aisha murmured, "I think I'd like it if it rained every day, just so we could sit here together like this." Rafik smiled, brushing a wet strand of hair from her forehead. "I think I'd like that too." Her hand found his. Not a shy touch, not hesitant, but deliberate. Fingers entwined. The train jolted slightly, and she laughed softly, leaning into him without thinking. His heart caught. Once, twice, 1,000 times. And in that simple, quiet moment, something deep settled between them. No words, no gestures, no promises were needed. Their hearts already understood each other. The growing bond. By now, the passengers in the compartment had begun to notice. Noticing the subtle warmth, the gentle smiles, the quiet laughter shared between two people lost in their own world. But Rafik and Aisha didn't care. They didn't need an audience. Their love had grown in the small, sacred spaces between glances, in the soft brush of hands, in the quiet understanding that they were now a part of each other's lives. Every morning, every shared song, every gentle hand squeezed deepened their connection. Every passing day, without words, told more than 1,000 conversations could. And yet, neither of them had said the words that mattered most. The words that would seal their hearts together forever. If you want, I can continue with part 9, where a small separation or challenge. Not every morning after that felt perfect. One Tuesday, Rafik arrived at the station earlier than usual, heart light with anticipation. The train screeched into the platform, doors slid open, and he scanned the compartments eagerly. But Aisha wasn't there. His stomach sank. Maybe she was sick. Maybe she had taken another train. Maybe something had happened. Every stop passed, and still no sign of her. Rafik's mind spun through 1,000 possibilities, each one heavier than the last. His usual calmness, the one that carried him through long, monotonous days, had disappeared, replaced by unease and longing. The empty seat. He sat in their usual spot, staring at the empty window seat across from him. For months, it had been her place, her little world by the window. Today, it felt unbearably empty, like a part of his own heart was missing. Rafik tried to focus on the passing scenery, tried to read the newspaper, even fiddled with his phone. But nothing worked. Every corner of his mind kept returning to her absence. The train stopped at every station. People got on and off, but still, no Aisha. Finally, he whispered to himself, "Where are you?" A flicker of fear. By mid-journey, Rafik's worry had grown into a tight knot of panic. His mind conjured worst-case scenarios. What if she had fallen ill? What if something serious had happened at home? What if she had stopped coming? The thought alone made his chest ache. Love, he realized, had a way of making absence feel heavier than presence. The relief of reconnection. By the time the train reached her usual station, Rafik had almost convinced himself she wouldn't come. But then, as the door slid open, there she was, running, hair slightly messy, cheeks flushed. "I'm so sorry," she called as she hopped onto the train, her breath short. "Exams, and I missed the morning train." Rafik didn't care about excuses. Relief flooded him so strongly, he nearly laughed out loud. "You're here," he said, voice catching. "That's all that matters." She smiled sheepishly, sliding into her usual seat. For a moment, they didn't speak, just looked at each other. Her hand brushed his lightly, tentative, but reassuring. And in that simple gesture, the tension of the morning melted away. The silent promise. The rest of the journey passed quietly, with neither needing to speak much. Their hands occasionally touched, their shoulders grazed gently, and their smiles carried the weight of unspoken reassurance. Rafik realized something profound that day. Love isn't just the laughter, the songs, or the easy mornings. Love is also the worry when someone isn't there. The ache in the chest when absence feels unbearable. The relief when the other finally appears, safe and smiling. That morning, sitting side by side, fingers brushing, hearts steadying, they both understood, without needing words, that their connection had deepened. It wasn't just a passing crush anymore. It was real, and soon it would need words. Words that could no longer be left unspoken. The next morning, the sky was soft and clear, the sunlight spilling through the train windows like warm gold. The rain and monsoon days had passed, leaving a calm that mirrored the quiet anticipation in Rafik's chest. Today felt different. He could feel it, even before he stepped onto the platform. Aisha was already there, sitting by the window with her notebook open. But today, she wasn't doodling. She was looking out at the passing scenery, a thoughtful expression on her face. When their eyes met, she smiled, but there was a softness in her gaze, a kind of vulnerability Rafik hadn't seen before. The moment, Rafik sat beside her, his hands slightly trembling as he placed his notebook on his lap. The train swayed gently, the rhythmic clatter beneath them like a heartbeat. For a moment, neither spoke. The air was thick with something they had both been feeling for months, but hadn't dared to name. Finally, Rafik took a deep breath. "Aisha, there's something I need to tell you." She turned toward him, eyes wide but calm, lips slightly parted. I've felt this for a long time," he continued, voice steady despite the flutter in his chest. "Since the first time I saw you on this train, your smile, your laughter, the way you make even the ordinary mornings feel extraordinary. I've been falling for you." Aisha's hand found his, not hesitantly this time, but firmly, like she had been waiting for this moment. Her eyes glistened, a soft tear forming, though her smile remained bright. "Rafik," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. I feel the same. I've been scared to say it, but I've been feeling the same way for months." Time seemed to stop. The train rattled onward. The world blurred outside the window, and for the first time, their hearts spoke without hesitation. The first kiss. Neither of them needed words now. Fingers intertwined, palms warm against each other, they leaned closer. The train swayed gently beneath them, the soft hum of metal wheels against rails echoing their shared heartbeat. And then, with all the tenderness and hesitation of months of unspoken love, their lips met. Not hurriedly, not dramatically, just softly, gently, as if the world had been holding its breath for this one moment. When they pulled back, their foreheads rested against each other. Both were smiling, eyes sparkling, hearts racing, fully aware that their lives had changed forever. A new beginning. The rest of the journey passed in a quiet bliss neither had ever experienced. Words were no longer necessary. Glances, touches, and shared smiles carried all the meaning they needed. Every stop, every passing field, every drop of sunlight streaming through the window became a memory etched into their hearts. From that day onward, the train rides were no longer just routine. They were sacred moments, chapters in the story of two hearts that had quietly discovered each other and finally, fully, admitted their love. Rafik looked at Aisha, and she looked back. No words were spoken. They didn't need to be. Everything had changed, yet nothing had. The train moved forward, just like life. But for the two of them, the journey had truly begun.